Hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming this afternoon. And welcome to the talk of protocol engineering, or how to make blockchains actually do work and they do what we want them to do. This talk is it goes into why corporate engineering is important, what it is, how it works, and like really driving the point like why this is something that I think not enough people are focusing on, but that is something that if we want this ecosystem as a whole to succeed, we really have to start paying more and more attention to. I'm Adrian. I'm one of the founders of Cryptium Labs. We are fundamentally a team of researchers and engineers that spend all their time building decentralized networks, sort of trying to push the envelope of what blockchains can do. By the way, you may know us for also running a validator, so we also do that. So I'd like to start off this talk by just ensuring that everyone is on the same page when it comes to what I mean by protocol engineering. Because I think a lot of people sometimes get confused about what this actually means. So protocol engineering isn't about building smart contracts. It's not about building applications. It's really about what goes into building the base layer, so the layer one, the fundamental infrastructure that makes everything on top work very well. And it is fundamentally important because everything sort of is built up from here. I'd like to sort of start off with a small thought experiment or example, just to sort of like highlight where we are right now in terms of this space. Imagine tomorrow Berlin, for whatever reason, it could be an earthquake takes down the majority of the internet, it could be down to war, people cut undersea cables. Imagine tomorrow Berlin, as the entire city, wants to switch its financial system to run on a decentralized, permissionless, and censorship-resistant blockchain. And if someone would ask, if the city of Berlin would ask me tomorrow what they should do, I could not tell them. And this is, I think, the fundamental problem. Like, we currently do not have any sort of base layer infrastructure that is able to support a medium-sized German city, and just one of them, right? Even if we take all of them together. And I think it's important to highlight here that I sort of exclude things like Tron or iOS, because they mostly don't fit into the definition of what is a decentralized censorship-resistant network. But even if we take Bitcoin, Ethereum Classic, and so on, and take them together, we do not have enough capacity and any of the infrastructure to even onboard one city. How are we expecting to sort of onboard people globally if this is sort of the current state of these protocols? And I think the most impressive part about all of this is that as an industry about 10 years old, as a global market cap, we have about $30 billion worth of market cap, and yet we can't get a single German city to run on the combined networks. Yeah, so now the actual talk starts, so why does any of this matter? Well, as you can sort of tell from the example I used earlier, with the Berlin example, is that the current state of blockchains is bad. It's arguably atrocious, really. Where we sort of promised the world this next financial system, this permissionless system where everyone can be their own bank and no one will have to pay a middleman anymore, I can hold my own keys, no government can seize my funds. And yet we sort of are currently in a state where none of this is really possible unless you spend a horrendous amount of effort in making this work. And then even if everyone spends a horrendous amount of effort, all of this will break immediately because there'll be too many people. So like right now the usability challenges are arguably one of the few things that save us from everything like getting flooded with activity and all these chains halting immediately. And yeah, just like to consider how all this industry is and like how much money went into building the current state of things. And so in this talk I'm talking a little bit on some of the reasons why we ended up in this model. Okay, I'll come back to that in a sec. It is important to understand that there are things we can outsource to layer 2, but we can't sort of say, well, layer 2 will magically solve all our problems, and this is why the base layers can remain at 7 transactions a second. I can almost guarantee you that there is going to be no future in which Bitcoin is a global settlement layer with 7 transactions a second, and you have a layer 2 solution that supports 7 billion people actively using this. This is just completely unfeasible. Layer 2 is maybe a constant size scaling factor, maybe a large constant size scaling factor, but it will fundamentally come down to what is the average failure rate on layer 2, and this is sort of the base layer throughput that you need in order to resolve those disputes. And I think a lot of times core development is underappreciated because no one really cares about infrastructure until it stops working. And I think in Ethereum solves very obviously, once CryptoKitties actually did something, everyone was like, holy shit, none of this infrastructure currently works. We should start building scaling solutions. But afterwards, once CryptoKitties went away, everyone's like, yeah, this is fine. We can build layer 2 things. This will totally work. And due to this fact that this is somewhat underappreciated, it also results in this underfunding model, right? One of the best examples for this is, by the way, Parity. So if you think about Parity Ethereum as arguably one of the major Ethereum clients in the world, that to some extent saved Ethereum in 2012 when the spam attacks happened. But if Parity as a company has received about $4 or $5 million, I forget the exact amount, in an Ethereum Foundation grant in 2019, about 4 years after Parity Ethereum actually saved Ethereum to some extent. And just compare those $4 million, that sounds like a lot, right? But compare this to the billions of dollars that went into dApps that built on top of Ethereum, and you get this massive funding mismatch where it is not really a surprise that that we've been selling these amazing dApp experiences to everyone, but we don't have an underlying infrastructure that can support it, because it's how do we allocate resources? Well, it's way easier to write a white paper and do a dApp that doesn't address any of the fundamental issues. So the current system has these inherent incentives where people should focus and where smart companies spend all their time and money on trying to convince people that they're building applications on top. This is mostly because there is currently no real business model for how core protocol development is funded, right? So the business model, if I want to be a dApp, or I do a token sale, that token may be pointless, and in almost all cases it is pointless, but it is still a business model that propelled most of the cryptocurrency space throughout 2017 and 2018. For core development, this is somewhat different, especially if you care about core development within an existing platform. Of course, you can always fork off and then you do your own token sale. That's cool too. But we have very little incentives for people to keep building, for smart companies, smart people, to stay within a singular ecosystem and just extend the underlying ecosystem. And it resulted in this massive gap where Ethereum at launch had no dApps, but then the dApps took off, but the underlying infrastructure never kept pace with the application development that was happening on top of it. And due to that, we are nowadays, and by the way, I'm just using Ethereum because it's an obvious example, but this will apply to almost all other systems, unless the systems are specifically designed to address some of these incentive issues. And another why protocol development really matters is, I think, due to the way funding works within the blockchain space, we often have this notion that the internet was built in a single day by a guy that wrote one white paper and then had a team of 20 engineers build this white paper over the next 6 months. There's very little focus on iteratively upgrading the underlying infrastructure over the next 20 years. And interesting enough, we're starting to see the first projects adopt this, and Telos being the first one of it with binding on-chain governance. And Polkadot will have a similar system. And I think if these systems can start figuring out how to now incentivize people to actually do this iterative upgrades, we'll actually end up in a state where we'll have quite fascinating, quite well-working underlying infrastructure. But so really the main takeaway is it's very unlikely that we'll get to a good state of infrastructure if the only thing we do is build this once and then hope that some other magical thing will happen. And I know people will say, well, even Ethereum upgrades over time. That is true, but the upgrades are somewhat minimal in the last 5 years. Like when you actually think about what happened in the last 5 years, there was very little that changed in the underlying infrastructure of Ethereum. And right, this sort of resulted in that we currently have an underlying infrastructure that lacks everything from scalability to interoperability to even privacy. And really, the two main challenges for core protocol development are one, launching governance, and two, business models that make sense for like large teams to keep caring about core outside of being the first founding team, right? So the on-chain governance one is sort of staggering to me. For example, someone here in this room could have the best, most brilliant idea on how we want to go, how we can scale every single system. And in most existing systems, they have no way, they have no plan on how do I go from this idea to this implementation to this being deployed in mainnet. So like this feature of binding on-chain governance where, and by the way, this is something that I'm relatively close to because we did this in Telos like 2 weeks ago, where you inject a hash of the next protocol version, and then the coin holder that globally goes and votes on it. And then all nodes will automatically upgrade to the new protocol as long as the chain, as long as everyone approves it, or some form, right, like governance systems. They're specific. So those are the two main challenges. The most ironic part about all of this is that we're an industry that fames itself with being good at mechanism design, at like thinking what are the long-term economic incentives where these systems behave well sort of over the next 50 years and are secure over the next 50 years, only under rational actor assumptions, and yet sort of at the most fundamental level of how do the systems themselves evolve, we sort of somehow went, well, this I guess will happen somehow. You don't have to design for this specifically. Right, and the main reason why any of this is important, why like if you live in a world where sort of there's only one player and there's only a monopoly and only one thing to choose from, then you don't have to compete. But right now we live in a world where there are about 2,000 to 3,000 different tokens, maybe about 500 different networks, and eventually this will be competition to like who survives and who doesn't. And my assumption is that about 99% of all of this will go away. Yes. The thing though is that, by the way, I'm not suggesting that you start hitting the people next to you because they don't hold the same token as you do. I think there's room for sort of like 10, 20 of these systems, but there's definitely room for 2,000 of them. Because it's very unlikely that these 2,000 will be useful for the general population. And so they will fail for two reasons. They will fail for either failing to build a good community around this, or a good application, develop applications on top of it that makes it useful to the general public. But much more likely they will fail because their underlying infrastructure will not evolve with the time, and that may be because they don't want to. So this may be Bitcoin, and interesting enough for Bitcoin this may be fine as a model, but more likely is that they won't have enough people that have an incentive in keeping the development going for the underlying infrastructure outside of sort of the first 20 people that got involved in the project. And now sort of, how can newer systems address some of these challenges? So how can systems that you think about maybe building right now address this? Well, one thing for certain is binding on-chain governance, where we can upgrade, where any developer in the world can inject the next protocol, and we can sort of have this plethora of contributions because they don't have to understand who the 5 kingpins of the specific system are that they have to sort of lobby for the next 2 years in order to get their chains approved and upgraded into mainnet. And I think like really being able to show people that there's a clear path, look, like this is the current state of the world, this is what you want to change, and then you end up sort of in state B, and so you inject your implementation, and then there's a clear path that we end up in the state B eventually. And interesting enough, on-chain governance also prevents another problem, which is this sort of forking behavior of the state. And I know that Gant has talked a lot about this, where if a majority of your coin holders want to enact something, it is very difficult for the minority to fall away without significantly altering the state. Right? Let's say 80% of Bitcoin holders want change A. The other 20% will have an incredibly hard time forking away, because unless they burn the balances of the other 80%, thereby destroying lots of economic value, the other 80% can just go and re-inject the same proposal to upgrade the fork to the same system. And due to this, we will see much more cohesiveness. So I think on-chain governance sort of solves this to some extent. We should keep exploring more, but this is much more we're starting to tackle this much more so than the other problem, which is the business models around core development. And it actually interesting, it goes into this thing where I think not many coin holders have realized how much power on-chain governance systems give them. Right? Take the example of Tesla's. It's maybe about $1 billion in market cap. If the Tesla's community wants to print 10 to 20% inflationary funding, and this can either be you take 80% of your block reward and you put it into a treasury, and then you don't call it, then you call it treasury funding instead of inflationary funding. It's all the same thing. So government systems can dilute their own value through some mechanism in order to spend money on things they want or they think they need. And I think this will also allow us to sort of emancipate a little bit from these centralized foundations that we've been all setting up to do these token sales, because all of a sudden, sort of over a 5-year horizon, the governance systems themselves have probably access to more capital than the foundations will ever have. And if you build better governance systems, they can move much faster than these centralized entities. The other thing is that if you, as a system, manage to find a can establish business models for core development, you prevent this forking behavior that we currently see, right? And I don't mean this in terms of state, I mean this in terms of core dev teams that decide, well, I would like to get paid, and so I'm going to create my own token, my own network. And I'd just like to give 2 examples here, one of them being Adrian and the other one being Polkadot. So Adrian is about the opportunity cost. So let's say Adrian lock drop succeeds and they actually, the network goes live. If the network is going to be valued at about $50 million, I don't know, this is sort of like thumb in the air. Who knows, maybe there are a lot of worse projects that are valued much higher than this. It would have resulted in that the Adrian team immediately receiving about $5 million through their about 10% pre-mine, which is, to put this into perspective, more than Parity has ever received to build the Ethereum client from the Ethereum community. And the second example here is Polkadot, right? Imagine a world in which the Ethereum community had on-chain governance and had decided to inflate the supply about 5 to 10% and put 5 to 10% of the Ethereum supply vesting over 10 years, earmarked for Parity. Parity would have roughly, at like today's market caps, about $100 million a year incentive to, instead of building Polkadot, they should be building Ethereum 2.0, right? I think government systems that really start to appreciate how heavily they can influence the decisions of core developers to build and to extend and improve an existing system over forking away into their own thing will do incredibly well sort of in the near future to the medium term. The last thing being on reinventing wheels. And this may be slightly controversial depending on how far into open source you are. One thing I think that many blockchain communities fall trapped to is this idea that they want to be building everything themselves. That like only the encoding file that I build myself in my chosen language with my favorite tools is the right thing to do. And I'm telling you that no one cares about this, and so the only thing people care about is how fast you deliver a usable baseline product to the general market. So you should copy and steal as much as you can. There's no point in reinventing every single encoding library, every single proof of stake implementation. We should all learn from each other. And I think more importantly, that governance systems should also consider funding sort of things that don't go into core protocol, right? Like governance systems are effectively like large community DAOs, and they should act as such. And so they should also pay for things like researchers working on the next sharding implementations, even though they never make it into protocol. so that you can move away from this model where everything depends on a centralized entity doing these kind of things. So I'm running out of time, but I'd just like to sort of give you a brief overview of where I would put my time, if I were you, over the next 5 years, in sort of areas that will be somewhat very important. One of them being interoperability. It is very unlikely that we're all going to live on our own blockchains and like own siloed gardens. It's much more likely that assets and state machines will be decoupled, and they sort of assets move freely between state machines. The other one, zero knowledge proofs, both for computational compression as well as privacy preserving properties. Proof of stake, we sort of haven't even started to scratch the surface of what is possible with good proof of stake implementations. We can most likely make them way more secure than they currently are, and they're already fairly secure. Next one being consensus, sort of how do machines come to agreement over a network boundary. Scalability, how can we allow the city of Berlin to actually use any of this technology? And governance, how do we set the right incentives for the long run to both incentivize people to build not only applications on top, but also build the underlying base layer and extend the underlying base layer. Cool, that's it for me. This is a very quick 20 minutes. You can find me here on Twitter, or you can find Crypto Labs on Twitter, and I'll be around afterwards if you have any questions. Thank you very much.